It's no secret that the Thorn Trilogy is a beloved continuity in the Halloween franchise. Today, I wanted to talk about that trilogy, tell you which one's my favorite, which one's my least favorite, and why. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Nick here at the Lost River Drive-In, and today I want to talk to you guys about the Thorn Trilogy, Halloween 4, Halloween 5, and Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. Now, specifically, what I wanted to talk about in this video is address the pros and cons of each movie and find out which one comes out on top. Try to be objective when speaking about each movie when you're talking about what it does well and what it doesn't do well. If you guys are Halloween fans or just horror fans in general, make sure to subscribe to my channel because I do stuff like this a lot. Definitely a Halloween guy, but I've got quite a passion for horror as a whole. So I want to address the elephant in the room at the very beginning. There are people that get annoyed when you refer to this as the Thorn Trilogy because Thorn wasn't introduced until Halloween 5, and also because technically Halloween and Halloween 2 are in continuity with these three films as well. So really, if you think about it, it's 5 movies, it's not 3. But you all know what I mean, or what any write-up on the internet means when it references the Thorn Trilogy. We can get into semantics and argue, but that's not really the point of this video. I solely want to focus on these 3 movies and talk about their pros and their cons. And first off, Halloween 4. Halloween 4: The Return of Michael Myers was a big deal when it came out. Not because it broke records and took the world by storm. No, not really. At the time, it was #1 at the box office, sure, but it still had a pretty paltry run compared to Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Michael just didn't rule the 80s like these guys did. However, it was a movie that, when it came, a lot of the fans were really happy with it. It was a return to what the franchise had done best. You guys remember, after Halloween 3 came out and failed critically and commercially, they kind of had to go back to the drawing board, and the future of this series was kind of unknown. Now, enter Halloween 4. What does Halloween 4 do well? Well, first of all, Halloween 4 does play off of a lot of similar beats from the original Halloween. You've got a babysitter, you've got other teenagers, you've got Michael Myers breaking out of an institution and coming to a sleepy little town in Illinois to kill people. Also, you have his psychiatrist, although this time a little more mad than the last time, on the hunt for him. All of those paths are eventually going to collide, and they do in this film. Halloween 4 also saw the return of a truly great actress leading the series. Danielle Harris was fantastic as a little girl in this movie. I know a lot of people say, like, oh my god, she screams so much, she's so annoying. And by a lot of people, I'm specifically referencing my mother. But she really carried this movie, and she did a really good job. It also boasts some strong performances from Donald Pleasence and Ellie Cornell. There's a lot to like about the cast in this movie. The setting of the film does a really good job of making it feel like it's set in the Midwest. This truly does look and feel like Haddonfield, Illinois. And although it was filmed all the way across the country from the original Halloween, you wouldn't be able to tell because these are very quiet, small-town streets. With a strong score, a good cast, a nice setting, and some delightfully gory moments, Halloween 4 marked a really good return for the Halloween franchise. But what doesn't it do right? First, it can be both a positive and a negative to be a lot like your predecessors. In a lot of ways, this being like Halloween is a good thing. In other ways, it's not so much. There's less ingenuity here. There's less originality. This was also written right before a pending writer's strike, so it had to be written in like a week and a half. So they didn't really get to flesh the script out as much as maybe Alan B. McElroy would have wanted to. So it really does play some of its cards very close to the vest. This is also where we really started to get weighed down in the series by familial connections. After it was revealed in Halloween 2 that Laurie Strode was Michael Myers' sister, that was kind of a shock to the system. To come back and have her now have a daughter and Michael's coming after her, it was already starting to get long in the tooth. It also takes away from some of the depravity of Michael Myers. Having a motive was never something that I really liked. On the one hand, I can't help but think about Laurie Strode and Michael Myers as siblings, and on the other hand, I hate it at the same time because I like when he is a mindless killing machine. The first half of Halloween 4 is particularly strong. You really get to meet some of these characters and get to know them. You get to see the town, the surroundings of the town, and the inner workings of the town. It's actually quite interesting, and there's a nice atmosphere built up here. Sadly, in the second half of Halloween 4, it really plays very closely to the original Halloween, and there's some gaffes here and there, whether it be weird dialogue or a mask that should have never made the final cut. And it makes you wish that the film could have stuck to what the first half was delivering, because by the time you get to the end, you feel like it's a lot of things you've seen before. So Halloween 4 was a welcome return and a good return for Michael Myers, but in my opinion, I don't think it's subjectively the strongest film in the Thorn Trilogy. Next up is Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. Now, a lot can be said about this film and has already been said about this film, so I'll try to keep my thoughts on it brief. If you know me, you know I'm a huge fan of this movie, so I also want to keep my bias out of it as much as possible. What does Halloween 5 do right? Well, Halloween 5 also sees the return of Danielle Harris, and I think she gives an even better performance here. I think asking this young girl to spend half of this movie using body language and facial expressions to act rather than words is a tall ask, and she delivers on it. Danielle is absolutely great in this movie. You also see Donald Pleasance come back as Dr. Loomis, and while the character is definitely nuttier in this film, his performance is incredible. Similarly to Halloween 4, it gets Haddonfield right for the most part. You get to see a lot of this town, you get to see people in this town, and some of the inner workings of this town. It feels very lived in. This doesn't feel like an artificial town that we're just being placed in. Halloween 5 also boasts some of the most suspenseful sequences in the entire series, and even detractors of this film will agree with that. The laundry chute sequence is one of the most suspenseful sequences in this entire franchise. The chase through the woods in the car with the two kids, that is nail-bitingly suspenseful because you're worried about the safety of these two children that this man is chasing. There's a scene in a car where Tina is with Michael Myers, but she thinks it's her boyfriend, and through the body language of Don Shanks, who's playing Michael Myers, and just his piercing eyes, wondering what's going to happen next, it's very suspenseful. Halloween 5 has a lot of that. Halloween 5 also, just like Halloween 4, has some gorgeous kills. They are mean-spirited, at times they're gory. Michael Myers is truly unleashed in this film. But I think one of the biggest pros about Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, is the aesthetic to it. Dominique Athanin-Girard was a French filmmaker, and as someone who has recently just begun to watch more Italian horror films, I've really started to notice some through lines with those films and Halloween 5. Whether that's the framing of a shot, the lighting, some of the music choices, there's just a lot of personality to this film, and I think Dominique brought that. But there's a lot of cons with Halloween 5, and one of those would be Jamie being mute for half the movie. A lot of people didn't like that. A lot of people didn't like that it undermined the end of Halloween 4. Halloween 4 really ended on a cliffhanger. It was like, oh crap, is Jamie going to be the next Michael Myers? Has the evil transferred to this little girl? And Halloween 5 definitely undercuts that ending. There's a lot of gaffes here, just like in Halloween 4 as well, whether it be the mask that's subpar, the clown cops, and some questionable ADR at times. There are technical issues in this film that, if you watch it close enough, you can pick up on all of them. Also, there was a lot of changes in this film. Now, some would see that as cons. I actually quite like it. Like the huge Myers house, because they really needed this gothic looking house with an attic and a basement. The script called for it. So, while I love it, it is technically not in line at all with the previous versions of the Myers house we've seen in this series. And therefore, yes, it can kind of be listed as a con if I'm being fair here. Halloween 5, just like Halloween 4, did not have a polished script. Halloween 4's excuse was an impending strike. Halloween 5's excuse was, hey, we need to strike while the iron's hot and get another movie out there. Now, if you're holding out hope that I'm going to mention Tina as a con, I'm not going to. Wendy Kaplan does a good job in this movie acting. If you have an issue with Tina, it's because you have an issue with the way the character is written. But it's not objectively a con if the way the character was written is exactly how that character is played. And Wendy Kaplan chews up the scenery when she's on screen. Also, if you like Tina, head over to my Teespring and get yourselves a Team Tina shirt right now, because we are a movement, we are growing. So even as someone that loves Halloween 5, I can objectively say that a lot of the goodwill that Halloween 4 brought back into the franchise, Halloween 5 squandered a lot of that just a year later. And then it took us 6 years to get the next Halloween film, and that was Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. Now, this is one of the most talked about Halloween films and has been for decades, and there's good reason for that, because the production of this film was an absolute nightmare. This was the first Halloween movie to have the Miramax and Dimension ownership. This was the first one that really had serious studio interference. That's not to say that Dino De Laurentiis, back with Halloween 2 and Halloween 3, didn't try to muddy up the waters at times, but this was where it was worst. Now, I need to mention to you guys, I am talking about the theatrically released edition of Halloween 6, because that is the one that was mass produced and sent out to the public. That is not the producer's cut that we can now see in beautiful HD. I'm talking about the one that up until a few years ago, most people had seen and would consider Halloween 6. Now with that, the pros of this movie. It probably has the best atmosphere of any Halloween film. This movie looks and feels like October in the Midwest. It is gorgeous in that way. The aesthetic of this film, just to die for. Michael Myers in this movie is truly a curse in and of himself. He is a machine. Just like I said with the previous two movies, the gore is upped even more in this film, and the creativity in some of these kills is truly breathtaking. There's also some suspenseful moments in this film, just like Halloween 5. I specifically think of the shower sequence and the bedroom sequence with Beth and Tim, especially when they're slowing it down for effect. Really adds to the experience. You've also got a decent cast here. Look, Kim Darby and Bradford English are great as the parents of Kara Strode. Like, Kim Darby is this mousy little mom that loves her family, but also is kind of a pushover. And Bradford English is like the asshole of all assholes. But they both do really well in their roles. Marianne Hagen is really good as Kara Strode. I've always really liked her, and I feel like she's kind of an unsung hero of this series. And Paul Rudd. People take issue with Paul Rudd as Tommy Doyle, and I don't get it, because the way the character is written is exactly how Paul Rudd plays it. It is awkward, he's antisocial, he is weird, he's obsessive, he's all of those things, and Paul Rudd delivers on that. Like, that is a guy that you're like, I don't know if I'd want to be in a room alone with you. And that's what Paul Rudd was asked to do. And he nailed it. Common theme here that I mentioned with the other two, and I'm going to mention with Halloween 6 as well, is Haddonfield. Haddonfield is really expanded upon in these three films. And just like in 4 and 5, it is a big character in this film too. Maybe even more so because they've banned Halloween. Haddonfield doesn't accept Halloween anymore. And that was an interesting idea, and one that actually had been toyed with the original idea for Halloween 4. And we finally got to see that take place on screen. Halloween 6 had a lot of new ideas, and that is to its detriment and its advantage. But specifically talking from the pros point of view here, there is a lot put into this movie that is new, that is fresh. Whether you like the Thorn storyline or not, it was nice that they actually came up with a believable explanation for what was just a dropped moment in Halloween 5 that they had no idea what it meant back in 1989. There was a lot about Daniel Farron's script that was risk-taking, and it was very, very forward-thinking, and I liked that a lot, while also tying a lot of loose ends up from previous movies in this series. There was a love that was in that script. But the cons of Halloween 6 are there no matter what cut you watch. Because if you watch the theatrical cut, sometimes it doesn't make sense. There's not enough footage there to really follow up on some of the things that are introduced in this movie. And if you watch the producer's cut, sometimes there's too much footage to where it just steps way out of the realm of possibility, and it doesn't even feel like a Halloween film anymore. There are certain decisions that are made, whether it be Michael and Jamie and this baby, that are just kind of like, I don't know about that. Like, I think we have stretched it a bit too far here. So, like I said, while the ingenuity and originality was refreshing, it's also a con because it became a hack job at the end of the day. Similar to the motivation in Halloween 4, Halloween 6 takes it a step further. Not only is it familial, but now we're getting into distant relatives and we're getting into weird cults. Look, like I said, I do think it's cool that they tried new things, and I thought Daniel Farron's was actually really smart in a lot of what he put together. But it doesn't mean that it makes sense or fits into the Halloween series. And a lot of times, especially in the producer's cut of Halloween 6, just goes a step too far at times. But the biggest con for Halloween 6 is the final version that we got in theaters was not the version the writer or the director really wanted to put out into the world. This was a movie that had kind of been piecemealed together after producers fought with the director, fought with the writer, fought with the studios. It was a mess. And because of that, Halloween 6 took on a life of its own and had many different cuts, not just the producer's cut before it was widely available. There was also a director's cut, which wasn't approved by Joe Chappelle, but it was going around as the director's cut of Halloween 6, which actually had footage from both cuts into it, as well as other stuff that didn't make it in either cut we have now. Halloween 6 was just a mess behind the scenes, and at times it shows on screen. Having said that, what they were able to salvage from such a problematic shoot is impressive. Halloween 6 reaches certain highs in this franchise it hasn't reached since, specifically when it comes to the atmosphere and the aesthetic. But just like Halloween 5 6 years before it, any goodwill this franchise had was dwindling yet again after the underperformance of Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. So I tried to give pros and cons for each movie, objectively speaking. There was a little bit of bias here and there in my opinion, but I think that I was pretty fair in that. So that brings us to what's the best movie of the Thorn Trilogy? Objectively speaking, what is the best movie when it comes to acting, script, the way it's shot, all of that? For years and years, the popular answer has been Halloween 4: The Return of Michael Myers. And if you made that argument to me, I wouldn't tell you you're wrong, because I do feel like you have a solid argument there. But I feel like, objectively, believe it or not, I think it's Halloween 5: The Revenge of Michael Myers. And I know this might not shock you guys because I'm a big fan of that, but I actually think based off of the criteria I listed and the criteria of what makes objectively a good film, I think Halloween 5 has more to offer than the other two do. Now, Halloween 6, a lot of it is not its own fault. We talked about the mess that was that movie. And Halloween 4, some of it wasn't its own fault, with a rushed script and over-reliance on going back to the roots because they didn't want to take too many risks, until the end of the film, which was a great risk. But Halloween 5, I feel like personally, boasts the best performances of all three films, specifically with a few people. I think that Danielle Harris in Halloween 5 gives the best performance of anybody across these three films. I just do. That's my opinion. Because, like I said, she's asked to act half of the movie without dialogue, and she was a child, and she nails it. I think Halloween 5 also narratively is the strongest because it's not a super complicated plot. It's pretty straightforward, like Halloween 4. But unlike Halloween 4, it does add a few different wrinkles in there. There are things hinted at. A lot of people will go back to Halloween 5 and they'll get mad at it for showing that thorn symbol and not having an answer to it. But honestly, that's not unheard of in trilogies and franchises as a whole. Sometimes you will leave breadcrumbs, and you're doing that to keep your audience invested in what comes next. Dominique Athan-Gerard was just dropping some things like that because he knew Mustafa was going to keep this franchise going. I also think Halloween 5, personally, when it comes to cinematography, is light years ahead of Halloween 4. I used to think the opposite, but once I got the 4K of Halloween 5, I could not believe how good the movie looked. Whereas Halloween 4, I kind of think sometimes it looks like it was made for TV. So when it comes to the best performance out of the three films, I think it's Danielle in 5. So that gives 5 an edge right there in the acting department. Even though it might not have the best characters as a whole, I think the ones at the top are probably strongest in 5. And I really do think that. I think that the cinematography is light years better than 4. Though 6 might actually be shot better than 5, but because of so many narrative issues with Halloween 6, I don't think you can objectively make the claim that it is the best movie in this trilogy. Objectively, it might be your favorite, but there's just a lot of narrative issues with that film that you walk away from it no matter what cut you watch, and you're left wanting more. Halloween 5 zigs when you would expect it to zag. It adds some interesting new things into this franchise. It really tests us in a lot of ways that Halloween 4 wasn't willing to do because it didn't want to burn the bridge. It wanted to build the bridge back up because it brought people back in. And then Halloween 5 tried to get weird and experimental, and it burned that bridge back down. So there's a lot of criteria that goes into this, and still, I don't even think I can make the argument that it is truly the best. And I know that for a lot of you guys, my bias is showing, so you're not going to take what I'm saying seriously anyway. But I would challenge you to think about some of the things I said, whether it be the way the movie's shot, whether it be the score, whether it be some of the performances, whether it be just the newness of it, the risks it takes. Halloween 5 deserves a lot more credit than it actually gets. So, for me, I think Halloween 5 is the best. But you can make a very solid argument for 4, and I can't tell you're wrong. Sadly, I think if Halloween 6 maybe had a different director and a different studio behind it, it probably would have undoubtedly been the best. But because it got so destroyed from script to screen, we're just never going to know how good Halloween 6 truly could have been. Having said that, though, I love Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. I absolutely do. Flaws and all. It's probably top 6 in the franchise for me. That's how much I dig that movie. But I think when it comes to narratively speaking, 4 and 5 are definitely a little stronger than 6. But I want to hear down below in the comments section what you guys think is objectively the best of the Thorn trilogy. Give me your criteria, and then I want you to tell me what your favorite is. I know I kind of cheated here and I said objectively it could be 4 or 5, but I'm going to side with 5. And that's just my bias flipping the coin for me. But again, I can see the other side of it. But my favorite, without question, is Halloween 5. But I want to hear from you guys down in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thank you guys so much for stopping at the Lost River Drive-In. This is Nick, and I'm pulling out.